Welcome back to the John Fredericks Radio Show. This is Mike Rubino filling in for the Godzilla of the Truth. One of my favorite guests on air right now, Governor George Allen. Governor, good morning.
Good morning, Mike, and all your great freedom-loving listeners.
How are you doing this fine morning?
I'm alive and well. Susan and I enjoyed our 34th wedding anniversary last night.
Well, congratulations.
Looking forward to this. You have a great lineup today. You have our good friend Mercedes Schlapp and Jeff Landry, great Attorney General in Louisiana, had the best fundraiser I ever went to, a gator hunt.
I went to the same hunt. Oh, it's the best.
Yeah, it's just so unique. And then you have A.J. Erskine on. I don't know when he's on with the seafood folks, but I 100% agree with what he's talking about with their need for temporary workers.
Well, I had him on in the 6 o'clock segment, and he and Jack Brooks, and Jack is he's the president of the Chesapeake Bay seafood industry. Right. I mean, they have such an interesting problem in that, the administration took a real stab in the dark here with the seafood EO, and I think that they largely hit the mark, but they missed the one critical component that would actually alleviate all the pressure this industry's under.
Yeah, it's something when I was in the U.S. Senate, I worked with Barbara Mikulski, who was then a U.S. Senator from Maryland, and the watermen and the seafood industry just need these workers for shucking oysters and picking crabs and all of that. But I'm glad you had them on and bring that issue to the attention of the people and hopefully the administration to remedy it promptly.
That's what I'm hoping for. Well, I want to focus on your work. You are recommending things to the National Coronavirus Recovery Commission, and I want to dive in right there. What have been the recommendations so far? What do you see as far as our economic recovery, this latest jobs report, and the surging stock market?
Well, the National Coronavirus Recovery Commission is a project that the Heritage Foundation put together, and I was honored to be one of the 17 commissioners, for a diverse group of commissioners from all over the country own it. And there's recommendations to governors, to state legislators, to Congress, to the president, the executive branch, and also civil society. Some of the ones that I think are the most important, there's hundreds of them. Now, obviously, some relate to governors, and in fact, state legislators. One of the recommendations is state legislators ought to review and possibly revise the statutory grants of emergency powers that are given to governors in light of some of these excessive executive actions taken throughout this pandemic. But the ones that I think make the most sense and are really needed is, number one, liability protection for businesses of all kinds. So if they're operating following CDC or other safety guidelines, they don't get hit with lawsuits, and that's an important one that Congress could act, and also state legislators can do that. The other, and this is one that I think is very important long term, so that as we reopen, rebuild, revive, with innovation and the promise of America, one of the things everyone is surprised and worried about is how vulnerable we are to China and really unsafe and unreliable supply chains of active pharmaceutical ingredients, medicines, pharmaceuticals that we need. And so what we need to do is make sure the United States is the best place in the world to manufacture these pharmaceutical agents, these medicines, this equipment that we need, rather than being vulnerable to countries such as China and regimes that are really very adverse to us. And to me, that is something that is so essential for our national health safety. You, Mike, have heard me say for years and for decades that we need to make American energy independence, which we've done thanks to the innovation of hydraulic fracking and horizontal drilling and directional drilling and so forth, and the geology and the good policies of the Trump administration to unleash those energy resources. We need to do that for our national health safety. And there's good companies. We were emailing Flo out of Richmond, thanks to Peter Navarro's insight. It's gotten a big grant to manufacture quickly and efficiently, and Flo is spelled PHLOW in the Richmond area, and Medicines for All is with them as well. But this is going to be great to get pharmaceutical agents made efficiently, safely here in Virginia, and more importantly for everyone in the United States of America.
Yeah, I think that what their basic business plan is that the current pharmaceutical system, as you just mentioned, is broken, and there are all these active pharmaceutical ingredients which are used to make these generic drugs that we rely on as a people, and they're currently centered out of countries like China and India, where their labor costs are relatively low. So that our reliance on these ingredients really makes us beholden to a country that we don't want to be beholden to. And the Trump administration has made a pivot from the previous administration in that we're taking on China industry by industry. And Modi is a dear friend of the president's, but I think that we also recognize that there is a problem with their economy too, where they have cannibalized, and this can be said for the seafood industry too. They look for areas to cannibalize our market share, and then they do so, which makes us as a country reliant on their pricing and their ingredients and their ability to produce things. But when a pandemic like the coronavirus happens, our ability to go and get those is strained. So discussing flow more, I mean, what do you make of their immediate impact to to Virginians? They're based out of Petersburg in the Richmond area. So what do you make of their ability to help Virginians, whether it be our reliance on imports or just, bringing more jobs to the Richmond area?
Well, sir, you make some really great points, Mike, and you're obviously very conversant on the issue. First of all, for jobs, yes, it would be great. The Richmond area, the Petersburg facility that they're operating with was a company that once was called Behringer Ingelheim that I had worked with and recruited to expand in Virginia, a German company. All the changes in pharmaceuticals, a fellow named Frank Gupkin had relationships with all of them. And so it's great for Petersburg, it's great for the Richmond area, it's great for Virginia, it's great for America in that their process is called continuous manufacturing or continuous chemical manufacturing, which is a much more efficient way of doing it than batches. And we're going to get into a bunch of biology and chemistry that your listeners won't understand. But the great thing that I see in it is it reduces the waste that's involved in making the final product. And they've done this for HIV/AIDS patients in Africa, where they needed to be able to do it on site there and reduce the cost. So not only can they be able to manufacture more efficiently, they'll have less waste with this continuous approach. And in fact, it's a green chemistry that saves green money, so we can be cost competitive with it. Now, this first grant that they've received from the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority,
BARDA.
BARDA, this can be the beginning of something that is really fantastic for jobs in the Richmond area and in Virginia. And the reason it's important nationally is, as you say, these countries, India is the world's largest democracy. If they have problems, like so many countries have with a virus, they're going to take care of their own people first. I also care about the quality, and there's so much counterfeiting and diluted or adulterated drugs. Heck, you wouldn't feed your dog food from China.
No.
So why would you want to ingest and think that the medicines that they're sending over that are not inspected by the FDA are going to be helpful? And part of what we're trying to do with the National Coronavirus Recovery Commission is to make sure that never again is a solution to this, to a virus, whether it's this one or another, is shutting down the economy. Part of the reason that everything was shut down, they said, we didn't have PPE, we don't have the medicines, the hospitals are going to be overrun and inundated. None of that happened, but there was a shortage, clearly, of PPE and medicines, and what's going to happen soon will be therapeutics being developed, and you want to be able to manufacture those therapeutics as quickly as possible to get them to people. And when a vaccine or vaccines are created, again, you want to be able to develop and manufacture those as quickly as possible to get them dispersed. But we need to learn from this pandemic, look at the response. There'll be an after-action review. I think some states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida and Georgia and Oklahoma, Colorado have been led very admirably. Others have been more halting, let's say. And from it, we need to understand what is needed to be prepared when this happens in the future. A lot of decisions, a lot of balance, a lot of the concept of proportionality is needed. But one of the things that clearly needs to be done is we need to have a stockpile of these pharmaceutical agents here in the United States, manufactured and made in the USA. And that's where a company like Flow, and with proper policies, can make sure that the USA is the best place in the world to manufacture these pharmaceuticals. At one time, the tax laws were so great that Puerto Rico, a territory of the U.S., as we all know, was a great place for pharmaceutical manufacturing. With Flow, the Richmond area in Virginia can be just as good as Puerto Rico once was, and let all the states compete for this manufacturing.
Well, you mentioned in that the economy as, essentially the first thing that gets crippled in a coronavirus pandemic, as we just experienced, and the Commonwealth is opening up over the next couple days, and it's already begun to. But I want to discuss the economy. The futures market's up 900 points in the Dow. The S&P's up 5 points in futures trading. The economy continues to show signs that it's recovering quickly. Now, what do you make of exactly how the nation's opening up? Do you think that there's opportunity for this to occur again in the fall? And then, obviously, you're a phenomenal politician. What do you make of the politics going on in the country, and can we be more economically centric?
Well, I'm glad to see these numbers. If this was a government-induced and government-decreed recession, and throwing literally millions of people out of work, one of the things that never should happen again is you have government decreeing a company or a business as a non-essential business. And there were layoffs of people in Virginia and probably some other states too, in hospitals, because the governor shut down so-called non-essential medical facilities. So hospitals are laying people off, and people were not getting checked for cancer and so forth. So I'm glad to see it coming back. It's coming back more slowly in Virginia than in other states, but all of this is good. But the one thing that needs to be done to prepare for the future, because there's still half the country and people are very risk adverse, companies are going to do what they can to be as safe for their workers and for their customers. But there's still a lot of people who are very hesitant, and then still, wearing face masks is almost like wearing a bumper sticker anymore with it. But I think that they can learn from the governors in the states that have opened up that this is not going to be the end of the world, and understand the balance, the sense of proportionality of where these deaths are. The people who need to be protected, and this is what we've learned, are those in nursing homes.
Yep.
Nearly 60% of the deaths are in nursing homes. And so if we keep uncaging free people and free enterprise and let innovation move forward with adapting for safe procedures, I think our economy can rebound. But some sectors, it's going to take a longer time than others. But the sooner the better, and every day that a state waits or a locality waits, the deeper in the hole those businesses are, and the jobs and the vitality that we want in our free enterprise system. Now,
As we're 148 days from the presidential election, and you have an economy that's revving, but obviously we still have this lingering threat of the coronavirus. We have what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. What do you make of the president's reelection opportunity? As I just saw a poll this morning, Joe Biden's up 12 points in Michigan per the poll. Now, I don't always believe polling, but you have your finger on the pulse of the country, and you understand exactly how electoral politics works. So what do you make of everything going on? I know that our listeners here on the John Fredericks Show are always interested in how the president's doing and what the election looks like. So what do you make of it?
Well, John Frederick, who you're substituting for, is one who's always had his finger on the pulse of the voters, and you do as well. It is hard to say. This last 2 weeks, with the tragic, terrible death and murder of George Floyd, has really created a lot of turmoil. I think the best leadership was out of a Chattanooga police chief who said something to the effect that any police officer who actually thinks what was done in Minneapolis to George Floyd is acceptable, turn in your badge. Mm-hmm. And we need to get unified, obviously, and whether it's pharmaceutical manufacturing in our country and a variety of things, but we want to make sure America's a meritocracy, where every single person, regardless of their background, their gender, their race, their sexual preferences, orientation, all have an equal opportunity to compete and succeed on a level playing field. And I think that is the sustained resolve we need to have, and that leadership. I think that President Trump's record on the economy, which was going great for all people, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, women, everyone, until this pandemic hit, I think he has to make the case that who do you trust the most to revive our economy? My view is the best social program of all is a job. And I think the president has shown that, and his initiatives on tax policy, regulatory reform, which is really important in this recovery, as it always is, energy policy, strong national defense, all of those things, I think he's shown great leadership. And then you've got to compare that to the new Green Deal that'll jack up everyone's electricity costs by $50 to $100, and all the jobs that would be lost internationally with their policies on the other side. You got to get it comparing agendas. And I think that if people care about making our country more competitive, more prosperous, with more opportunities for all, I think that the proven record of the current president, his administration, the Trump-Pence administration, is better than what AOC and the Democrats are offering, which I think would just be so harmful and so regressive, particularly to middle-class, middle-income families who can't afford to have higher electricity, higher food, higher fuel costs just to placate some United Nations climate change folks flying in private planes to Paris. So, I think people right now are not focused on politics. I think they will be when we get to the fall, and then I hope it's a choice between two completely different types of ideas of how do you get this country going again. And one, I think, is burdensome on one side, and I think the other is very supportive of free people in the free enterprise system.
Well, you're exactly right. It's a binary choice. And as you mentioned that, the Trump campaign has released a new ad. It's called The Great American Comeback. And essentially it's saying that we're renewing, restoring, rebuilding together, and we will make America great again. It's interesting that he ran on Make America Great Again. And based on, what we have in the current, climate, where we have seen just a horrible tragedy occur with George Floyd, and obviously the coronavirus pandemic definitely stifled our economy to a large degree. He now has to, make America great again, and I don't think that that's a bad thing to run on. I do believe, though, that we're probably catching the president with these polls at an artificially low point. I think that he has an opportunity to come back, and you've run in numerous elections. You understand better than anyone that when you're 5 months out, it's not necessarily the end-all, be-all of an election. I think most people start paying attention in large degree in September. So we're still 2 months away, 3 months away from when people start to pay attention. We have only 2 minutes.
And by the way, Mike, I think that's even more so now. I mean, with all the demonstrations and the protests and everyone that I know is in agreement that we need to make sure that we have equal administration of justice as well as physical, health and equality and economic opportunities for everyone in our country, and that's key. But then there's the divisiveness of the arson and the looting, and that distracted from the message of people. And fortunately, most recently, at least this last weekend, there wasn't anything other than positive demonstrations for equality of opportunity. And that's all of this. And then you have the COVID-19 shutdowns and all the rest of it. Once you get to Labor Day, we're going to have an idea of what's going on in our country, and I think it'll be much better. And then people can be focused more on which policies do we want for ourselves, for our enterprises, for our children going forward. Right now, it's still in too much of a crisis mentality for good reason. And so any polls right now, to me, are hopefully our country will not be in such a crisis in another month.
I completely agree. Governor, it was a pleasure having you on, as per usual. Thank you so much for joining me here on the John Fredericks Radio Show.
Well, thank you, Mike, and stay strong for freedom.
Thanks so much, Governor.